All right, folks, welcome to our bonus session of Reset LAN Management Boot Camp. I'm your host, Ryan Graven. But with that, I'd like to introduce a familiar face to many of you, a man with over 13 years of experience helping organizations see the bigger picture when it comes to their technology investments, the owner and CEO of Matrix Networks, Kyle Holmes.
Thank you, Ryan. Appreciate that introduction. And thank you to Ryan for putting this on, and Jeremy for all the content he created. I know there were some sleepless nights preparing all of that. I hope you all got a lot of value out of that. Thank you to our sponsors. And most importantly, thank you to everyone who's attended this and participated in this. We're really excited to have you on board and be a participant in our training session. Today's training session is going to focus on the finance side of things and where does the cost go? Where do we spend? Where can we spend more effectively? So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. Starting off, the world has changed pretty dramatically in the last 20 years, especially in the last couple of years. And as technology has evolved, we've seen the network become a choke point of activity for the business. The tools we use are almost exclusively consumed via the network, whether it be online or local to the network, consumed wirelessly or even remotely today. The way we perceive our customers and competitors today is largely driven by the technology they use and their availability of that technology. So when our networks fail, we're unable to compete. Can't create our goods, can't get to market, can't communicate, can't process payments. Sometimes we can't even sign contracts. So keeping this in mind, the network cannot become a drag on the company by failing or underperforming. But at the same time, we got to balance that with the choices that fit the model of the business that we run, the financial realities, and the unique capabilities of our team. So investment in the network has to be well planned. It cannot be a reaction to a sudden need or failure. To control costs, you have to understand them, where they come from, how we get there, and where should we be investing. Okay. So when we look at that, the common network dilemmas when it comes to cost is, first, where do I make investments? And a common problem for a lot of companies is investing in the wrong technology. They're buying either equipment that's horribly overpowered for what they need or underpowered. Either way, if you go underpowered, you're going to have a network that doesn't support what you need and eventually need a replacement more quickly than expected. If you're overpowered, you're going to end up paying for things you never use and capacity you don't need. So make sure it fits your environment. Oftentimes when we go for the wrong technology, it also requires a lot of excessive management and expertise that we don't necessarily have on staff. That's a common challenge as we buy this new piece of equipment. Now we've got to learn it and integrate it into our stack. Another common issue we see is we see customers that purchase equipment that doesn't meet the basic needs for PoE or backhaul. So in today's world, we have different varieties of PoE, and PoE plus. Plus, we have different ability for switches to power a certain amount. So you need to pay attention to that. Are you putting out cameras? Are you putting out new access points? They take a lot more power. Same thing with stacking. We talked about stacking in some of our previous conversations. Make sure the equipment that you're buying fits into that vision. If it can't stack, it can't be redundant. And then obviously, a centralized orchestration layer that helps, lead to maintenance costs and downtime. If we don't have that centralized orchestration layer, we get lost. So spending too much in specific areas is another area we end up, kind of getting stuck. So where are we spending too much? Physical hardware and internal resources and reactionary spending are the primary places we're spending money. So with physical hardware, that's a pretty obvious one. We see it really easily. But there's also the internal resources and external contractors we use. Those costs are kind of hidden. We need to pay attention to those. How much time are we spending managing, massaging, and maintaining this network? Could we do it more efficiently? Then obviously being reactionary. If we let our equipment age or we initiate projects without understanding the impact on the network, that can lead to sudden purchases that take away our ability to plan, negotiate, design, and build appropriately. Obviously, redundancy is something we all are concerned about. We all want to make things redundant. It's absolutely critical to our environment that we stay up. But if you ask any IT guy what's better than one thing, they're going to say two of those things. It doesn't mean that that's always the answer. Instead, we need to focus on what key resources we need to keep up and focus on how to build plans to keep those key resources available to the staff or customers that we serve. And we aren't going to spend a lot of time on security, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention it. So security, we aren't really we're not going to focus on it in this session, but it is absolutely critical to the environment and your network staying up. If your network is breached and is taken control of, who knows where that's going to lead? You can lose data, downtime, obviously ransomware. There's a lot of different options there, and security is more than just a firewall. You got to think through the entire process. And then obviously staffing. Who do I staff? What's the right type of staff? And how much does that cost me? So where are some of these network costs? Obviously, we have equipment refreshes. Those should be planned. And correlating to those should be the support agreements or the firmware agreements to keep your equipment running. You need to understand the impact of that. What's that going to cost me in year 2, in year 3, in year 4? And what is my next refresh cycle? How long does this equipment refresh need to last? Obviously, understand the cost of labor, internal and external. So there's a lot of hidden labor. We run IT teams. If you're spending 30, 40% of your time doing this task, what is the impact to the organization, and where could we spend that labor more appropriately? Obviously, downtime is very expensive. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a second, but using monitoring and troubleshooting, we can reduce downtime. At the end of the day, it's going to cost something somewhere. Monitoring and troubleshooting reduce downtime, which is an unexpected cost. With monitoring and troubleshooting, we can actually identify those issues and resolve them more quickly and reduce the amount of time we're in downtime state. And then obviously cabling infrastructure is kind of that thing that's forgotten. Everybody just thinks, hey, I'll deploy a wireless access point and suddenly everything's going to be hunky-dory. In reality, we need to make sure that cabling infrastructure that supports both our wireless and wired infrastructure makes sense. We need fiber to the right places, and that takes expertise and design and time. If we do that appropriately, it's going to save us a lot of money in the long run because we won't have to do it again. So how much does this really cost? Gartner says that it's an average of $5,600 a minute for a customer that's in a complete down scenario. So what are those costs really? It's intangible costs, things that are hard to quantify, things like missed deadlines and project delays because people can't communicate or work on their specific projects. Loss of customers, hard to tell when that happens, but if they can't get to your website, they can't process payments, they're going to go somewhere else. Loss of reputation and future sales kind of ties right into that loss of current customers. Of course, if you're publicly traded, you got to worry about how this is going to impact my appearance to the street. You can see a drop in stock price, which can affect everyone's 401ks and benefits packages. And of course, public relations recovery costs. This gets out to the general public. You're going to spend some money and effort in trying to repair that damage. And then obviously there's the more hardened recovery costs. You're going to pay employee overtime. You're going to end up paying for repair services, outsourced repair services likely. I got to grab replacement parts, but of course I got to pay for expedited shipping and I can't negotiate those replacement parts. You got, obviously, if we lose any data, the cost of recovering data is extremely expensive. And then we are all dealing with supply chain issues right now. It doesn't get any better if I'm in an emergency scenario. So one of the things to note from this is it's really important to have a little bit of a backup for your key components, whether that's in a HA type configuration or whether you just got something on the shelf. Make sure you got something to replace in the event you have a failure. All right. So avoiding downtime. Big piece of this is having a proper refresh cycle. We are shocked at the number of times we walk into an environment and we have millions and millions of dollars of technology riding on a network from 12, 15 years ago. On the other side, you'll see people that are constantly refreshing equipment for really no huge value. Understanding when you need to make that refresh cycle will help avoid that downtime because you won't have legacy gear that's just failing on you. Perform a network audit so you understand how your network is configured. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And that inexpensive redundancy is key. So once you understand how your network is set up, take the time to identify where are my single points of failure and what could be done to route around that. What could be done to simplify this? So it's not a complex solution that I'm deploying, but at the same time, I've got the redundancy that I need to make sure I can serve up the applications and users what they need on a daily basis. And then build a multi-layered security practice. And what I mean by that is it's not just a firewall. We need endpoint security so that if something gets through that firewall, it's identified. We need to train our users on security. And obviously we need to build a good perimeter and segment our network appropriately using network access controls. All those different tools will help us to avoid overall downtime and minimize the amount of cost and impact to the business. So one of the ways we can do this is through orchestration and simplification of what we do. So the orchestration layer is the concept of, I've got a lot of devices out there. I want to control all those devices from a single layer and be able to have visibility. I want to know what's going on with them, be able to monitor them, be able to push out updates and troubleshoot quickly and efficiently. If we don't have this layer, we're flying blind. You wouldn't ask a pilot to make a flight without a map and a plan, but that's often what we're doing when we're working within our environment. So the orchestration layer gives us that efficiency. For those that don't know, that maybe are not on the technical side, traditionally to program a network device, you're going to remote into that device, each device that you need to change, make the configuration changes, and then go to the next device. That's a time-consuming process. It's error-prone. The situation where if you fat finger something and put it in incorrectly, you got to identify what went wrong, find it, fix it quickly, because it can impact business. In comparison with an orchestration layer, we're able to push out seamlessly to all those devices all at once, see the response and how it's working, and revert back if needed. Gives us a lot of flexibility to be able to manage the network. Simplifies the training process in a pretty dramatic way. If you're like most clients that we work with, network is your secondary practice. It's not your primary practice. So learning how to manage the network isn't a primary focus for the organization, but yet it's still an important thing to understand. By having an orchestration layer, we give that simplicity to your team so they can learn the platform, understand what's happening, and be nimble and agile in the way they attack the network. Application programming interfaces are pretty native to the orchestration layer, and how that impacts us is we can do a variety of different things, from monitoring to automation, and all the APIs that we build, we're able to provide to you as well. So as we build APIs at Matrix Networks, we can provide those and show you kind of what it is that we're doing as an organization to improve your networking experience. But you can also build those in-house as well. There's freedom to access those as long as you have access to that orchestration layer. Obviously, this simplifies moves, adds, and changes in a big way. Being able to see where things are connected, how they're connected, what the impact will be, allows us to better design and better make changes. So we get to the orchestration and simplification, and now I want to start controlling my costs. Here's some simple steps we can take to control costs. So standardizing your equipment. Too many times we walk into environments where it's disparate equipment across sites, even within the same stack. We've got a mix of HP, Cisco, FortiGate, you name it, it's in there. Problem with this practice is it's hard to build backups. So, hey, I want to have a warm spare. What kind of warm spare am I keeping? It's hard for training. Staff has to know a lot of different platforms and a lot of different offerings. It's difficult to offer an orchestration layer across that many different types of equipment. And it becomes cumbersome and expensive when each time you're looking to buy a device, you have to go through a procurement process and figure out what type of equipment you're going to be buying. So standardize that equipment. Figure out what makes most sense for your organization. Go through your refresh cycle and then maintain that through your refresh cycle. Design for simplicity first, then redundancy. So we want to build this thing in a way in which it's easy to manage. There's not a lot of failure points, and you can move forward seamlessly within the organization without worrying about the network. Quality monitoring and troubleshooting tools are worth their weight in gold. If we're able to identify the problem before it exists, we don't have the downtime. If we have the proper troubleshooting tools, we're able to move through those problems more quickly when we don't identify them and solve them. When we are operating blind, we really put our team and our customers and employees in a bad spot. Very few organizations have spent the money and time to understand how to deploy quality monitoring and troubleshooting tools. It's time for your organization to do that. And it's more than just on the internal LAN, it's on the broader wide area network, as many of us are consuming cloud applications these days. Outsource what isn't a core competency. I guarantee there are people within your staff that are doing things that aren't in their wheelhouse. Find ways to reduce that. Give them the things that they're best at and allow you to focus on the core competencies, which should be delivering the best applications for the organization, the tools that are unique and specific to you. The network isn't one of those. So outsource the components that you aren't great at and take on those that you feel you're strong in. Obviously, investing in security will control costs. It's going to cost something, but if we don't have the unknown of a breach, we're in a much better spot. Plus, you can get some discounts on insurance. All right. So equipment and licensing purchases. So when you're buying equipment and licensing, a couple pro tips here. Obviously, I think we all know when you buy more, you get a better discount. Also, timing matters. Understand the provider that you're working with, the manufacturer. When their end of year comes, suddenly there's some special promos that appear. Understand when those are and time your budget cycle and purchasing process around what makes most sense based on the vendor and what you're doing. At this time, I have to also mention we have major supply chain issues. So if you need equipment in the relatively near future, you should be ordering that equipment long before you need it. We're seeing up to 8-9 months on some pieces of equipment, a minimum of 4 or 5. So doing the volume purchases and having the correct timing in terms of their calendar and fiscal year is going to make a big difference. Understand the licensing model that you're dealing with. So different providers and different manufacturers provide different types of licensing models, everything from just a software, firmware subscription, all the way up to complete support. Understand what that looks like and make sure you co-term it. So if you're buying equipment over a period of time, it's really frustrating when you get to the end of that term and you aren't in a position to be able to renew it or migrate because there's just lingering licensing cost. Understand what you're buying. A lot of times people think they understand what they're buying, but they haven't spent the time to really research it or talk with a professional. If you're buying from CDW blindly, you're probably making mistakes at times. So taking the time to understand how it's going to impact your environment, how you're going to connect it, and what you're going to be doing long-term to support it is going to be a really incredibly important piece of this. Understand what you're buying, understand if it's overpowered, underpowered, and how it's going to fit in your stack for the next 3 to 5 years. One of the big questions we get is, should I lease? Should I buy? And I think that really depends on the business that you run, but there are some major advantages to going on a lease rental refresh cycle. It makes it simple to control costs. You can say, hey, I know I'm going to be on a 5-year cycle. This is how much it's going to cost me monthly. We don't have this big capital expenditure that we need to plan for. And the reality is that, technology and network equipment does need to be refreshed on a regular basis. So the moment you take it off the shelf, it's lost a lot of value and it continues to lose value as it moves through. So I think leasing is a very applicable way to approach the problem and allows you to normalize that cost for the CFO over a period of time. Another advantage of leasing is you can often embed all the licensing and support costs within that lease, which then really standardizes that cost. You don't have any unexpected costs as you go through it, and keep that very clean. Right. So internet and wide area network, we haven't talked a lot about the WAN because this has been a LAN boot camp, but when controlling costs, we do need to think about the impact the wide area network has in the internet. So first step in that is understanding the needs of the business. Where are our applications? Many of our applications have moved to the cloud. When those applications move to the cloud, we got to start thinking about how do we connect to those and maintain connectivity to that. That includes point of sale, CRM, our communications platforms, our quoting tools, security systems. It's incredible how much of the technology has moved to the cloud. Now you probably have a blend. You have some stuff on premise, you have some stuff in the cloud. You need to understand how you connect to all of those things and build a network that performs for both sides of that. Speed, everybody thinks they just need more speed. Throw more speed at it, that's going to solve the problem. Understand how much speed you're actually using. Is that really just backups in the middle of the night? What's the impact to the speed you have today? Do I actually need more speed, or do I need to optimize the internet that I have today? Oftentimes people are spending way more than they should on internet connectivity, simply because they think they need a gig or they need 500 meg or whatever the number is for them, 10 gig. Understand what it is. It could be you need 10 gigs. It's possible, but it's probably not very likely. Reliability. Internet products have different varying levels of reliability, and there's different ways to approach it. So you can pay for the most expensive service from the carrier to try to get your SLA, but the reality is that we know that internet circuits fail. We believe building redundancy with low-cost internet is more effective. So that's the model that we tend to use, but building reliability for your specific business and understanding the needs of your business is incredibly important. It's taking that next step, which is how do I control costs? And then where are my users? Where are they physically sitting? Obviously that impacts how we connect to the wide area network and where it's being consumed. Most importantly, don't let it fail. We need that access to the wide area network. We are sitting ducks, most businesses, if we don't have connection. So we need to think through how to be redundant, because that's going to be our most costly piece. But also just don't overspend. And then lastly, control access. There's a lot of tools that are available today that can help prevent against security breaches and make sure that the people that are accessing the tools that you offer are the people you want to be accessing them. Spend the time to understand how you secure a cloud environment as well as your premise environment. I think we understand the premise. Sometimes controlling access to cloud gets complicated. All right, so stop buying the new shiny. So often we run into situations where the IT folks are really excited about the newest technology that Matrix Networks shows them. It doesn't necessarily mean it's the best solution in your environment. It could be the best solution, but cut it in half. Just because it's shiny doesn't mean it's the best thing for you. Understand how it addresses specific business needs. If it affects those business needs, great, it's shiny, fantastic. But don't just buy technology to buy technology. Stop treating your IT staff like bouncy balls. We tend to just send them across the room like a bouncy ball. Hey, go fix this. And they just bounce right back 2 seconds later because they got to fix the thing that they were just working on. Let's have a plan. Let's make sure we invest in the resources around them so they can have success, and give them professionals to advise and consult and help them. Kicking the can on your network and security. So often the network is the thing that's left behind. It's the forgotten child. And when we do that, we expose ourselves to failure, security risk, and wasted time and labor. So don't kick the can on that. Spend the time to understand what it is you need to do with your network. It doesn't mean you need to refresh the entire network, but understand where you are and where your weak points are. And stop trying to be in the network business. You need network expertise, absolutely. But rely on a partner or someone you trust, a consultant, that can come in and be a part of that and give you that vision, or hire someone who has that level of knowledge and make it a core competency. But don't try to play in between. And then we want to start. What do we want to start doing? First step in the process, audit the network, audit security. It's very common for us to have a lot of tribal knowledge. Don't be dependent on the guy. If there's someone within your organization you are dependent on at all times to manage components of this, you have a choke point. Get them to document, work through documentation and cross-training. Make sure you understand the network as it is today. If someone's hit by a bus, you should not be in a position as an organization where you're going to suffer. The next step, once you understand your network, is building a business needs assessment. So from here, I'm going to be looking at what is the vision for my business for the next 3-5 years. And this is a department by department process, because each department is now adopting technology independently, the whole cloud creep. And as they do that, the stress on your network, the expectations for the network, and what you need to deliver changes. So you need to understand first, what does the business need? What kind of speed, what kind of applications are they going to be accessing? Where are they located? What level of security do I need for those? What compliance do I have to take into account? Once you've done that business needs assessment, you're going to have a much better idea of where you need to make your investments into the network. From there, we can actually get into designing, right? So we can look at the way it's designed today, taking into account what's remaining in place. Then you start figuring out how you want to build going forward. What sort of products are going in? How do we build that orchestration layer? Where's the redundancy come into play? What applications are critical? All of those conversations come into play and are built off that business needs assessment. And then budget it. Make sure everybody's on the same page and that they understand the importance of completing the project in front of you, whatever that might be. Once we've got budget, we got a good planning session that we've got ahead of us. Spend the time to build a plan and a plan B in case things go wrong. Think about the impact, the organization, and downtime as you migrate equipment or migrate tools. And then, of course, deploy and support. And then you got to rinse and repeat. If you've gone through this and it was 2 years ago, it's probably time to start looking at this again. Probably time to start evaluating where you are in process. Look at the business needs. Have they changed? If they haven't, probably what you have in place is a pretty good spot. But if their business needs are evolving, it's time to go back to the drawing board, design, budget, plan, and deploy again. So there are a lot of different things we want to consider. This is a little shorter session than the technical sessions. There's a lot of different things we want to consider when it comes to spending money in our network. And as we walk through the process, leaning on a trusted partner like Matrix is very advantageous. To give you an example of that, we had a customer that was preparing to make a large order for all of their locations, 16 sites, for new network switches. And we had an opportunity to talk with them about what they were designing and how they were going about this. And as we looked at what they were designing, we realized that they kind of overdone it. They had layer 3 switches pretty much everywhere, even as access switches. And we came up with a new design, and through that process ended up saving them about 25, 30% on the overall project. And all that is just taking the time to understand what it is they're really trying to accomplish. And that's what we're here to do. So if you have any questions about your network, how to document it, how to build it, and how to control costs long-term, we're here to help you with that and make life better. Thank you.
Beautiful.